Greetings and salutations. I'm Thom Bowers.
And I'm Matt Meldrum.
And we are Sons of Nothing. And because we don't really know how journalism works, we've decided to interview each other for Debut Redo, which is the 20th anniversary of the first Sons of Nothing album, which we're recompiling and reissuing and doing all kinds of crazy crap to.
Yes, we're going to continue on with our journey through the debut album from 20 years ago with tracks 4 through 6. But before we do that, we'll just beg, please consider subscribing to our YouTube channel and hitting the notification button so we can keep giving you these videos.
That would be this notification button right here. And there'll be another one at the end of the video. This is actually part 2 of the commentary. If you want to hear part 1, we talked about tracks 1 to 3, and you can find that right here. Or possibly here, somewhere on the screen right now. Before we get started, in the outtakes in the last episode, you started off with a question that I now want to answer because now I understand it.
It was too deep for you last time?
Well, you said, why didn't you just name this project after yourself? And at the time, that just struck me as an absurd thing to ask because I didn't realize you were time traveling. You were pretending like this was the first time this thing had ever come up, rather than today's project, but the original project, right? So in answer to that question, I didn't do it back then because when I finally decided, okay, maybe this should be a thing and I should form a band, I wanted a band name. I could not imagine just my name on an album. I still can't. I think it's just weird. I've only just in the last few years gotten used to the idea of performing solo. I've done a few gigs with just like a bass, like open mic things and whatnot, and it's been fun. But like the idea of putting together a solo record just still strikes me as, I don't know, fundamentally not me. And that name got picked out of a hat because I had used it earlier for the Floyd tribute thing, which actually predates all of this stuff. All the way back in the 90s, I was doing those as one-offs. So Sons of Nothing, which is a Floyd reference, just sort of by default became the thing. And all these years later, I'm not sure if we should have stuck with it. I'm wondering. We had a few chances to change the name of the band along the way. And sometimes I wonder if we shouldn't have taken one at some point. But that is the answer.
Well, better or worse, we're 20 years on with the name. I think we're stuck with it now.
I think so. And I think we've outlasted all the other bands that have come along with that name, trying to
steal it.
Take the throne. None of them have managed so far. So where are we? What's next? What's the next tune?
We are on track number 4, Velvet Elvis.
It's another day with my velvet Elvis to keep me warm and my plastic pool another way.
When we started this and you had said, why don't we do the whole record? There were a few tracks I was very concerned about, and this was chief among them, I think, because it was just kind of a heartbreaker, this song, because I really believed in it. It was one of the first songs I'd ever written, entirely by myself, words and music. And I really liked the lyrics to it. And I really thought this is a great step forward at the time. And then the results came in. And even back then, I was like, I don't know if this worked. So it was really cool, if a little bit daunting, to go back and try to make it better. And honestly, at this point, I'm really happy that we did, because I feel like I did redeem the song and redeem myself a little bit. And it is closer than it's ever been to the song that I wanted it to be. But my question for you is, we actually went through a whole bunch of different ideas of how this was going to work before we arrived at just strip it down to the drums and do it all over again. And you're the one who made the call. How did you arrive at that decision?
We started talking about, and I still think maybe we could do this sometime, a more piano, vocal, solo kind of deal, Ben Folds kind of vibe.
Kind of torchy.
Dressing up the piano. And what ended up happening was I was experimenting with doing that. And I was having problems remembering the arrangement. So I said, okay, well, I'm going to use the original drums to help me track this so I can start messing with it. And once that happened, I'm like, okay, well, I'm just doing the piano to these drums, and I really want to add the organ now too. And that's when it all blew up.
Yeah, I was like, well, we're halfway down the road already. Might as well just keep going.
Yeah.
And that was cool because I really do like James Clark's drum performance on this. And I think we ultimately made the right choice. You did the piano and organ and some new guitar. We brought in John Flanders once again, the mighty Flanders, to do a sax outro on this, which was probably my biggest challenge, other than delivering a new vocal that was listenable. My biggest challenge on this song was whittling down the saxophone, because one of the problems with this song, besides the things we've already mentioned, is that the arrangement was just so bloated. It's an almost 6-minute song on the record. And then part of that is like a 2.5-minute ride out that just goes and goes and goes and goes. And I decided, because I wanted to sort of have John let it all hang out and then choose the best bits, just give me a couple of takes on the ride out. Well, he gave me 2.5 solid minutes of wailing twice.
Yeah.
And to have to go through all that and pick like 75 seconds of the best stuff, I ended up making the ride out longer than we originally planned it to be, because there was just too much good stuff. I had to just, and I got to keep that bit. So if you ask John, he'd probably say, you cut out all the, it could have gone on for 4.5 minutes. What are you talking about?
This isn't jazz.
But I think we distilled it down to the best bits, and it's a really good solo. I'm really happy with what he brought to the table.
One of my favorite parts of this song, other than getting to play the organ, I've had a lot of fun playing organ on these ones, but the outro and the fade. We don't do a fade very often in Sons of Nothing.
No.
But I grew up on fades. That's a sign of the music that I listened to growing up. And this long saxophone solo leading to a fade gives me such a warm Alan Parsons vibe.
Yeah.
It just makes me so happy. It takes me back to being 12 years old and listening to vinyl, listening to those fades. I think there's an art to a fade, especially when they're long and a little bit drawn out. And that moment, it's crash landing after you stop hearing the music, or you just really want to know what happens next. It leaves that to you. And it's just a different kind of ending. And I think it's just as legitimate as a true ending.
Yeah, I agree. And we had the choice, I think, on this one, that we could have ramped it up, or we could have let it fall apart a little bit. And I think we sort of went with the latter. The sax got a little more legato as it went out, and things got a little more tame as they went out. So it was a more relaxed sort of fade out. But I also love it when a band, they're sort of chugging along, and then as it starts to fade out, you can feel the energy ramping up again. And it's that anticipation of, wait, come back. That's also a very cool thing. And we played with it a little bit. I was, there were some things that were like early in the fade. I'm like, no, we need to move those to later in the fade, because it has to be that little bit, just as it's fading out, you hear that little extra bit that snags your attention,
Right. Pulls you back in.
Yeah. The funny thing is after stressing about the vocal on this thing, really, really stressing about it, because I've lived with that old vocal for so long, I've had that thorn in my side. I did it in 2 takes. I did the lead vocal in 2 takes, and then I did 2 more takes of the choruses just for alternate melody ideas. And that was it. Boom. And I think it came out pretty darn well. It's a tight, confident. I was able to tweak the lyrics a little bit, because there were some lines that I never quite was happy with originally, some easy rhymes that I thought were kind of placeholders at the time that just ended up never getting fixed, and I fixed them. And the lyrics to this song were really important to me at the time, because they were very autobiographical. They were a really clear snapshot of me at 16, the misunderstood teenage angst. And the song was almost called Regular Joe, because that line in the chorus about people think I'm a regular Joe, but I can see the world, that self-importance.
You totally can't you, at 16?
Yes. But yeah, that song is the summer of 1988 in a nutshell. And I had a lot of older friends who had just graduated high school, and I was feeling kind of lonely and adrift and trying to figure out what the future would be, and will there even be a future? And I feel like I'm destined for greatness somehow, but I just don't know how I get there, and all of that. And that's pretty much what the whole song is. There's a line I added later on, which was the maybe I should have stayed in school line, which that actually is a tribute to the Wall of Voodoo song Lost Weekend. There's a line in that song is maybe I should have stayed in school, he said. Yeah, I know, start your own business cleaning swimming pools, she said, which is where I totally ripped that off for the chorus. But that was also how I felt at 28 making this record and going, have I chosen poorly? So to be able to sing all of that now with a certain degree of confidence is was very cathartic. It was a lot of fun to do. So next up, we have the song that really kicked off this whole thing, which is Still Believe. And you've wanted to re-record this for a very long time.
Yeah, I've had the itch to re-record this song for so long, and you're right, it kicked off this whole project because when we talked about the anniversary coming up, that was the first thing I thought of. Well, let's re-record Still Believe. That'll be a great tribute to the anniversary. That's really kind of where I thought it would end in January when we were talking about this.
Yeah.
And turned out it was just the beginning. But this one is 99% new material. You kind of copped out on the intro and said, yeah, just leave the old bass intro. And it's a good one, so I don't blame you. But after that intro, everything's brand new.
Everything's brand new, and almost all of it is you, my friend. I sang some harmonies and I put a new bass on it. Contrary to most of the new bass lines I put down, this one's actually a little more simple. Yeah, a little, it's less adventurous than the original, whereas some of these other ones are more adventurous than the original because you added so much to the song that wasn't originally there. The bass didn't really have to carry it. And I thought, okay, I'm just going to hang back and get into the groove.
Yeah, I kind of stole some of the energy of the bass for the guitars. It's just what I heard. It's what I wanted to do. This one goes back to pretty early in the days of the band. You started talking about me doing vocals on this one, I believe, doing lead vocals. And somehow I just connected to this song. Lyrically, I connected to it. Sonically, I connected to it. So it's probably been the one on the debut album that I could relate the most to. So I was excited to redo it and put my own kind of stamp on it.
Yeah, and you did a lot, guitars, keyboards, drum programming, and you took my little synth solo in the original and blew out into this gigantic orchestral arrangement, which is just awesome.
When I started doing the recording of stuff on that, my first thought was, okay, I'm going to redo that synth line. I'll choose a different synth sound and I'll probably change it somewhat. And because I've heard that one so many times, it's kind of drilled into my brain. And so when push came to shove, I'm like, I got to do it from the original, but I don't want to just redo it as a synth line from the original.
Yeah.
So it was pretty fun to try and break it out and say, how would I actually orchestrate this and have violins do this part, flutes do this other part, and all kind of intertwine and just make it something totally different, but almost tongue in cheek, in my opinion. Because I'm like, here it is. I went full on out orchestrating this original line.
Yeah. Well, you kept it all melodically. All the phrasing is there.
Yeah.
It's just blown out into this. It's like that orchestral versions of classic rock. Like there was an orchestral Pink Floyd album I remember that was quite popular in the late 80s that did this sort of thing. And yeah, it is kind of verging on pastiche, but it's beautiful. And I think it really enhances the song. And there's not a lot of prog on this record for all of my taste in prog. And for as much as that would be developed as you and I started writing songs together and the band went on, this is a pretty straightforward record for the most part. But I really like the way that middle section sort of yanks your attention in a really different direction from what you just had in the first minute and a half. This is another Rain King song that Rick Kreifeld and I wrote together. And one of the things that when it came time to do it again, was I felt like, again, there were some placeholder lyrics in that original one, and there were some things that I just didn't think had aged well, or that I saw an opportunity to say some similar things differently, if that makes sense. I think the spirit of the song is still there. And the idea of the song, which is maintaining faith in humanity and an optimistic outlook in the face of terrible things that humans do and a negative, difficult to deal with situations. And it sort of all centers around violence, I guess, in a way, where in the original we had like the Crusades and then gang warfare and then domestic abuse were kind of the topics of the three verses. And here I've sort of mushed it all kind of more into one statement about the terrible things that people do to each other. And, some of it was definitely informed by current events in the same way that the election of 2016 inspired you to write Brave Old World. January 6th, 2021, definitely stuck in my mind when I was writing some of this. And just some of the other issues we've had in the country as far as violence goes, things that also made it into songs like Ricochet about gun violence. There was a lot I wanted to say, and I'm not sure if I got it all in, but I think I made it more cohesive than the original was. And hopefully it wasn't too hard to sing. Hopefully I kept the meter doable.
The interesting thing about that was it was a little bit difficult to, take a song that's this old and the phrasing to new lyrics. But after fitting them in the right places, it was a very easy song to connect with lyrically, as it always has been for me.
Mm-hmm.
But it was even more so based on, again, the unfortunate current events that we live in. It was easy to dig into this one from a singing standpoint and just dig into those lyrics. So
cool.
It was not hard to sing.
Nice. And that brings us to what I believe you've referred to more than once as the elephant in the room of the album.
Yes. Track number 6, Illumination.
Parentheses.
As I've referred to it for the last 18 years. Oh, the river song.
This song, actually, we're recording this the morning that the song was posted. And as I said in the post, this song always was kind of an awkward misfit child, even back then. It has all the same problems that Velvet Elvis had in terms of not having a really very good vocal on it and having some bloat that it didn't need to have and things like that, while also being a song that I wasn't really sure I could 100% stand behind all these years later. What can I say? It's a cheese ball of a song. It's corny. I was really kind of trying to do like a gospel rock thing. And it was more of an exercise.
You can't pull that off.
No, it was 2 questions. 1, can I write something like that? And 2, can I pull it off? And the truth is, yes, I can write something like that, but I shouldn't because I can't pull it off.
Yeah.
And when it came time to do this, it was like, well, reinventing it from the ground up seems like I just don't know where to go with it. You either go like and do something completely, so it's not the song anymore, or we just retrack the original and do our best to make it a competent bit of cheese, if nothing else. And I think we succeeded. I think this thing actually came out pretty tight. We used, we used James Clark's original drums. We used my adequate electric piano. You brought in new guitars and new organ. The organ playing on this is terrific. And way more organ than guitar than I was expecting, which is really cool. But the guitar that's there is also really cool because you got to pull out your Knopfler sort of sound, which you don't get a chance to do that often.
It turned out to be fun. I got to lay down the line here on where I'm coming from in this song. As songwriters, as creators, our songs are our children, and we don't love any of them more than we love any of the others, and we don't hate any of them. But this was not my song. This wasn't my album. So this is a stepchild. And I got to tell you, I've never liked this kid. But with that said, I can actually live with this song now, which is more than I thought I would be able to say at the end of this process. The other thing that pulled it away from the gospel cheese that wasn't to something legitimate was your bass line. And, I told you didn't need to do much to the bass line, but somehow you really transformed that bass line, which changes the whole feeling of the song, which I think is kind of amazing to do against existing drums that, are 20 years old.
Right.
To come up with a new bass line that really took it away from the plodding of the old one to something that's kind of bouncy and more interesting and completely not gospel.
Yeah. Well, thank you. That was the goal. And I was surprised to go back and listen to it and realize that the original bass line was tighter than I imagined it would be, but it was also pretty boneheaded. And I just thought, oh, this could be a lot more fun. This could be a lot more interesting and melodic and bring more out of those drums, because the whole song is just chugga, 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 chugga all the way through. So yeah, I thought let's play with it and see what we can come up with. And I guess we came up with something pretty cool. So one of the interesting things about the journey that the arrangement took was I had no idea what to do with this. None of us knew what to do with this. And first of all, I thought, okay, if we're just building on the original track, what if we tried to do it as an instrumental?
Yeah.
And it would be like you and Flanders trading licks all the way through or something like that. And then we would use it as a bonus track. We just shove it at the end and like, yeah, for completeness sake, here's this, but you can ignore it if you want. You can push stop if you want at this point. We didn't go that way. We went further, but in the course of going that way, I ended up cutting it down so short that there was almost no room to put lyrics in it anymore. There's like a verse, a chorus, a bridge, a chorus, and we're done. And the bridge is kind of just a reworked verse. But then I reworked the other verse. The lyrics are about 60% the same, but heavily tweaked and modified and twisted around melodically. I've shoved a lot more lyrical content into that first verse than used to be there. And the way I found a way to be at peace with this is from a lyrical point of view, because again, the whole thing was, it was verging on pastiche. It was like, I was trying to do like Operator, not Jim Croce Operator, but Manhattan Transfer Operator. Or there was a song that we did in high school choir called Rock Me in the Cradle of Love that also is pretty cheesy, but it sort of worked in that context. And I was trying to, sort of get that feeling into this. And I sort of didn't have anything to say, which I think was another of the problems. I was just throwing stuff out and there was no real there. In going back to rewriting it, it was like, well, I got to have something to say. Well, let's talk about the actual thing that we're doing right now. Let's go super meta. So the song really is about the song, and it's about re-recording the song, and it's about the 20th anniversary of this album, and it's about us. And, I don't know if you picked up on that, but it's
mind blown.
It even has a little reference in there to our song "Take Back the Throne" from 10 years ago, which is the midway point. So there's the origin point, the midway point with the crisis of faith, and the 10 years later where the faith has been rewarded by somehow being able to, against all odds, rehabilitate this little ditty. That was how I got right with it, and I think that helped. That certainly helped me sing it with a lot more joy and confidence than I originally sang it. That's for darn sure. It's still corny, at its root, but it's corn with conviction. And that's something I can live with.
What have we learned in today's episode?
Honestly, we're still in the middle of doing this right now. We're still putting tracks together as it goes on, as we're doing this commentary. It's a giant rolling snowball that we're just barely managing to stay ahead of. But the fact that we got River Song and Velvet Elvis up to a point where they feel good, I'm so excited about what comes next. I feel invincible, and I know I'm probably jinxing us by saying that, but I'm really having a lot of fun with this, and I hope y'all are out there too. We'll be back with more of this soon. In the meantime, there's a whole playlist of songs right about here, or maybe here, or I don't know, it'll appear somewhere in the next few seconds. We'll talk to you later.
Bye-bye.
So next up
is I don't know.
Wait.
How am I supposed to know?
You did it last time. I'll do it this time. There are two particular bits of magic from the original that I just didn't feel like I could replicate. So I cheated.
Cool. I'm not going to do that.
Well, no, sir, because you have integrity.
That's true.
That's right.
All
right. So
what have we learned in today's episode?
We've learned that Matt has integrity.
Yeah.
When
other people are
his
around.
decision to participate in this notwithstanding.
That's true.